Got a 2013 Dodge here that the owner called me and he said that every time they hit the exhaust brake that it was making a bunch of noise and squealing is what he was saying. What it's doing is anytime you get one of those exhaust brakes, only, if they only make noise with the exhaust brake on, or a lot of times when they're pulling real hard you'll hear a squeal, especially with these variable geometry turbos. And most of the time you'll hear it with the exhaust brake though, because what happens is if it's between the manifold and the exhaust brake, where the hot housing is on the turbo, it's going to build back pressure, and wherever that back pressure leaks at, it's going to squeal out that leak. So I'll show you where the leak is on this one. Most of the time to see any kind of manifold leaks on these Dodges, and any of the newer rigs, especially the Duramaxes too, you almost got to pull the inner fender out and look in there to see. One thing nice about a Dodge, it's an inline six, so you only got to pull one inner fender out the right hand side. With a Duramax, sometimes you end up pulling both inner fenders out so you can find out where the leak is. But I'll get started on this, and we'll pull our intake. We'll have to pull the turbo off. We'll have to pull the Egr Cooler off to get down to the manifold gasket. But I'll show you what the leak is. So you can see the black mark on the cylinder head right there. That's the very back manifold gasket. It's leaking, and I went ahead and tried to tighten the bolts up, and they were tight. So the only recourse is to pull it off and clean it up and put a new gasket on it. Pull your inner fender out. Just take your, just take a 5/16 rat or socket or whatever, a nut driver if you can get one on there. Most of the time the nut driver hits a tire, so I just took a ratchet and a 5/16 socket and take these bolts out along the outer perimeter here of the inner fender there, and there's a couple of plastic grommets that go up to the bottom of the battery box that you. No, actually I'm wrong about that. Now I'm seeing where this plastic rivets actually went up into. Well, they fastened up into here somewhere, but there's two bolts here too in the bottom of the battery box that go through the inner fender. You got to take out two 5/16 headed bolts. And once you get that out, you'll have to pull your your air cleaner and your intake, and you'll have to pull the turbo and pull the Egr Cooler. You pretty much got to strip the whole side of the engine so you can get that manifold off. It's a little bit of a job, so let's get to it. Alright, let's get the batteries out of this thing. This battery anyway. I had a question on another post, another video I'd made. He asked me why I didn't take off the why I didn't pull the grounds instead of the positives. I pulled the positives off, and what I've learned is that when I pull the grounds off, and I say I lay my ground cable out like that, if it flops over and hits another piece of metal, the circuit's energized again. So I always pull the positives off, and then I lay the positive. It's a lot harder for a positive to come back up and hit this positive post than it is for that ground cable to hit another piece of metal and ground out, and you got a live circuit. Because I'm just saying that's my preference. From experience, because I've had it happen. I've been working on something and unhooked the ground cables, and I got over there to take a starter or something off, and you went over there and it arced, and you went back over there, and the damn ground cable was hitting the manifold or hitting a piece of metal on something. It had grounded again. So that's just what I do. I tried to explain that to Paul, but I don't know if he got my post back or not. But that's why I do that. That's neat. One side's 5/16 and the other side's 10mm. That's cool. I think I've ever seen that before. Okay. Now, let's get this battery out of here. What is the hold down? I think it might be a 10mm too. Kind of glad I got it. Well, I got one service call I need to go do today. I got a road grader. They said it's got a bad steering cylinder or something leaking on it. I got to go out there today, but I'm kind of avoiding it. It's hot out there. I mean, you guys in the south and southwest are probably thinking, oh, he's just a whiner, but we might see 100 degrees for maybe 2 weeks of the year, you know, in mid-July, somewhere between mid-July and early August. And it just doesn't get that hot here. If you go about 100 miles south down to Redding, California, I mean, that's a hot hellhole down there. I mean, if it's 100 here, then it's 115 or 120 down there. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know how those guys can live in that shit, but we just don't see that kind of heat here that often. So, you know, most of our temperature range is in the summertime is usually, probably mid 80s, you know. Mid 70s to mid 80s, that's usually where it ranges. And when you get 100 degree heat for 2 weeks and you're not climatized and used to it, it just kills you, you know, and just wipes me out. And then about, you know, at the end of the 2 week period that you get for that 100, you just finally start to get used to it, and then it goes back to being cool again. So for about that first week, man, it just knocks the hell out of me. Yesterday I was so damn tired, I went home and usually I'll work till about 8 o'clock at night, but about 6 o'clock yesterday evening, I mean, I was whipped. I was just dragging ass, and I went home, and my wife, she was going to make me dinner, and I laid down on the floor because it was cool on the floor, and I fell asleep. I woke up at like 2 in the morning. So yeah, it knocked me down pretty good. So I guess you get used to it if you're living in that climate all the time. Of course, I get guys from Redding that come up here and they go, how do you live in this cold crap, you know, in the wintertime? Well, I guess it's same both ways. Oh man, this one clamp, the nuts, or the head of it's facing the block. So it's not very easy to get to. It should slide off of there, but it's not doing it. I'm just trying to get the clamp off the hose where it goes down to the intake side of the turbo. And it is not very easy to deal with. Is there some easier way we can do this? Well, not really. Wow, that's a real pain in the ass. Or, I got an idea. Well, I don't know if that's going to work either. Might be able to take our Egr Cooler hose off and get to it that way. And the last turbo that I pulled off was on a 12. I don't remember it being like this, with this goofy clamp down here positioned the way it is, but maybe it was. And that 12 is the one I rebuilt the engine in because one of these large branches, they just have Dodge service them. I don't know if they give them that lifetime tire deal or oil change or whatever the hell it is. I think it's something like that, so they just have them service them. Well, the guys that were servicing them didn't even know there was a crankcase. Well, that was at the dealer. They didn't even know there was a crankcase blow-by filter in there, and they never serviced it in like 130,000 miles. And this rancher, he didn't. he just drove around with the check engine light on. You know, it was partly his fault too, but you know, those guys were servicing it and they weren't changing that filter, and that filter got saturated with oil. You know, they do over time. You're always going to have a little bit of blow-by oil going through there. A little bit gets past the rings, you know, and eventually it got plugged up so bad that it forced all the oil out the turbo. And he had some kids driving it from the ranch, and they ran out of oil and seized it up. And so with 2012 pickup, we had to rebuild the motor in. We were going to get one from Dodge. Dodge said that Dodge, I'm not bullshitting you, Dodge quoted them $25,000 to change the engine out in that pickup. Dodge don't rebuild them, they just get another engine from Cummins. So I called Cummins directly, and Cummins said they could get a motor for it, but it was going to be like 30 weeks. So I stripped this engine down, and it had it ruined the crank. And I found a crank out of a junkyard, I think in like South Dakota, for like $1,100, and then I did get the kit from Cummins. The cylinder bores and everything were good. We just went back with standard pistons and rings. We honed them out, and the head was fine and all that. We just resurfaced it and we stuck it all back together. And it's running out there still, but I got the crank sitting over there. They told me I got to send that crank off and have it turned, and have them turn it down, and we can reuse that again in something else. But yeah, that was quite a fiasco, that whole deal. Sorry, I had to answer the phone there. Oh yeah, I might as well tell you about this old water truck over here. I thought it was kind of funny. The guy called me and he says, "Hey man, I got oil in my water and water in my oil." He says, I had another guy come out and look at it, and he said I had a cracked liner. And I said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but it ain't a cracked liner. There's I said, "First of all, I mean, what is it?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a mechanical N14. And I said, "No, it's not a cracked liner. There's no oil there to get back into the coolant system." I says, "If you had a cracked liner, it would be pressurizing your coolant system with combustion gas and pushing your water out." I said, "That's the symptoms, and then you might have water in the oil, but you wouldn't have oil in the water." I said, you got a bad oil cooler." And I said, "Is it missing or anything, or running rough, or?" "Oh no, it runs fine." He says, "Yeah, you lost your oil cooler." So I thought it was kind of funny. The guy told me it was a cracked liner. There's the old oil cooler. I called Fleet Pride there, and I try to get some parts reasonably a little cheaper for my customers. I call them and ask them, do they want genuine Cummins, or do they want aftermarket? What do they want to do? And I know this guy from Hart. I do a lot of business with him, and I know he tries to get the cheaper parts if he can. So I called them, and they said that aftermarket wasn't available for it, so we had to go genuine Cummins, and it was going to be about $800 for that cooler. So, which is kind of crazy. I don't know. I bought a cooler for an E-model Cat. An E-model Cat a couple weeks ago for a truck, and that thing was like $1,200 for that cooler. But anyways, back to this thing. So I'm gonna pull this Egr Cooler hose where it comes out of the turbo and goes to the cooler. I'm gonna pull it out, and then I can get to this clamp right back here that's on the turbo there, and then I'll have to pull this PCV or spring clamp or whatever the hell it is off there and pop that off to get it off there, and then we'll after that we'll start pulling the turbo intake pipe out of there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and pull this let's see, I think it's going to be easier. I'll pull this spring clamp here off, or should we just pull it? I think we'll just pull it off back here, and then that'll all come off with that hose there. And I think it's bracketed right. Yeah, it's bracketed right back in here too. You'll have to pull the bracket off of the hose. Yeah, it's the same as that 12 I worked on. And then there's the clamp down here. You probably can't see because it's so goddamn dark. Okay, so we got light on the situation now. But pull your clamp loose here and take this bracket loose here, holding these hoses on. And I'm going to pop the spring clip off here and just pull all that off as one assembly. And then you'll have to pull your here's your Egr Cooler. Make sure you drain your antifreeze before you pull that off. But pull this top cover off, because you're going to have to pull these clamps loose. Pull the top cover off here. 5/16 is usually what those are, or 8mm or whatever. And then you'll have to pull your, we got our little chicken shit lock thing here in our valve. Where's my flat blade screwdriver at? I'll pull the little lock out here, like so, and then you can unplug it and take it off, which I need 2 hands for, but unless I can't get it off. I gotta get it out of it. What a pain, man. Look where they hid the petcock. So I had to pull the grill off the front. The petcock's down in there. I'm trying to get this where you guys can see that. There, you can barely see right where the center of the camera is. That's where the petcock is. I took a pair of pliers and just twisted it and got it open. God, you got really, I mean, you got to take the grill off so you can drain the radiator. Oh, some of the way these guys do things is just unbelievable. It really is. There's no forethought of ever having to work on it again. So, got that off. I better put my grill, I'll start my grill bolts back in here, that way I don't lose them. These Dodge grills, these plastic tabs are always, a lot of these ranch pickups are always broke off. See where this one's broke here? They're always broke. So you'll have 4 bolts in the top. And once you get those 4 bolts out of the grill on the top here, the 10mm, there's a couple clips here, and just kind of be careful with it and wiggle it and shake it and pull up on it, and then pop them out of there. As you can see, there they are right there. Try not to break this plastic piece of shit when you pull it off. And you'll have to pull your little bonnet off too. It says heavy duty. Just get you a heel bar or something, or a screwdriver, or one of those, whatever they call them, little picks that pop those out. And now I'm going to pull the cover off the top here, and the dipstick. Pull it out of there so I can get that off. Pop that intake boot off there with that PCV hose that was coming up here. Here's your crankcase pressure sensor here. As you can notice here, this hose goes down into a nipple down inside here, and there's a hold down bolt right down here. You can't see it because the light won't come on. But this part of this is part of this upper valve cover where your your blow-by filter is. So you're gonna have to pull your blow-by filter out so you can access that. Must be like Cummins week. Like everything I've been dealing with. I did a turbo on an ISX yesterday. Well, not the turbo, actually the actuator. And then these two, you know, this water truck over here with the mechanical N14 with the oil cooler. And you know, I'll get like 1 week where I'll do nothing but just tractor work, John Deere tractor work, you know, and then I'll get another week where I do nothing but truck work, and kind of goes in spurts. It doesn't ever seem like it's really mixed together. It's kind of weird. I'll just throw these bolts up here right now. Go with the other side. So we got our upper, what I call the upper valve cover, but it's the PCV valve, our crankcase pressure filter cover. I got it off. There's a hold down bolt on this water tube here that comes from the head and feeds your Egr Cooler. So take this one out, and there's no bolt on this end. You'll have to pop it loose out of here. And there's a little bit of a flex joint here, and then you can work it loose down here. It just pops in there, and there's an O-ring on the end of the tube. And then we've got most of the water drained out of it, and we can start pulling pull this water line here, and we'll have to pull this bolt here. I'm trying to remember. That's just that banjo. I'm trying to remember. I think that banjo doesn't do anything really. How does that come loose from there? That's what I'm trying to remember right now. How does that come loose? I think I have to pull this EGR valve assembly off. I'm gonna have to see how that comes off before I explain it to you, because right now I can't remember. You'll see down here, there's a bolt holding this in down here on the bottom. 10mm headed bolt. Take that out, and then down on the bottom you'll have to pull the hose off that goes to your degas bottle. Pop it off of here, spring clip. It's kind of a pain in the ass to get off. But there's a hold down bolt right here on this hose with this ear on it, if you can see where my finger is. Take it out, 5/16 head, and then grab this hose with both hands. It's a pretty good tug on it, and pop it off this nipple. Make sure you take that hold down bolt down there loose, because it's going to be rigid. You don't want to end up snapping that ear off. So after you get that off, get that kind of moved out of your way, take this heat shield. There's two 5/16 headed bolts on the bottom down there, and then there's a stud up here. Take this 10mm bolt off, slide it off from here. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take this clamp loose here. This is your EGR valve. This is your EGR valve actuator. And we'll take this clamp loose right here, and we'll take these two bolts out right here. I've got all these bolts loose on this cooler, and we'll just slide the cooler off. Okay, guys, so we got the EGR cooler out. There it is, laying over there. These things are kind of a pain to get out of there. But you see, you got two studs back there. I forgot to tell you that last time. You got to pull those off where your exhaust comes into the cooler out of the manifold. So you take that off, take those two, take the 15mm. I had to get a socket on this one and a 1-inch drive extension and loop the ratchet over the top of the cooler to get it off. I got a deep well socket, a 1-inch deep well socket and a 1-inch extension, and that brought me out just right. And then I took an end wrench and climbed up under the inner fender there where it's out and pulled this one off. And then you got 1, 2, 3, 4. You got to take this whole assembly loose here for the actuator and get it out of there. And just flop it up here out of the way. Try not to be too rough on your cable there and kink it or something where the actuator grabs the valve here. But you'll have a gasket right here. You'll have a gasket on that flange back there. So now you can get, with that out of your way, now you can get to this bolt back in here and get it loose, and then take this one loose, and then you got this clamp loose here, and pop this off out of your way, and then we start removing the turbo. So there's two 13mm headed bolts up underneath that EGR support bracket. You'll have to reach up between the top of the manifold, exhaust manifold, and the bottom of that, and they're tucked back, and you'll have to get an extension, a little 3-inch extension, 3/8 drive ratchet, and a 13mm 6-point socket. And you can see where they thread into the side of the cylinder head right here. And then you're down to the top of your manifold off. As you can tell, where it was leaking right across here. You want to take a straight edge when you get your manifold cleaned up and put it across here and make sure that it's flat. Make sure it's not warped. If it's warped a little bit, you can either buy a new manifold or take it to the machine shop and just have them true it up. Back there on the back of the cylinder head, you can see where it was leaking. I opted on this one here to just leave the turbo in there. I started to pull it apart and pull it clear out of there, but you can just take these bolts out of the top here. One bolt's facing down. You'll have to get your end wrench on the bottom down here. And I had to get my cutting torch out and heat them. I couldn't get them loose. I broke one end wrench trying to get one loose, And I tried the other 3, couldn't get them loose with a longer end wrench, even a longer one. Couldn't move them. And I got my cutting torch and went up through here where the inner fender was and just put a little heat on them and they came right out. But be really, really careful when you're doing that. You know, don't burn up any wires or catch the pickup on fire. You gotta be real careful. But you know, you got this heat shield on here too. It goes on the front. But we got that out. Now I'm gonna take a die grinder with a 3M wheel on it and clean the head all up real good and clean my manifold all up and start going back together with it. It's pretty much reversal of disassemble. So